Good evening, everyone. Calling this meeting to order. Thank you very much for your cooperation and attention and participation and presence and all those good things. And silence. So we are about to start the Government Relations and Communications Committee meeting for Tuesday, October 10th. And we welcome again our new student representative this year, Jack Hughes. Welcome back our teacher representative, Amy McNally, and our committee members and administrative folks here, including our solo administrative liaison, Mr. Michael Petiti. Take it away, Mr. Petiti. Would you like to give us some administrative remarks?
Yes. So, a couple, actually, and I want to answer some questions at the end of the first batch, so it could be a little bit longer, but I'll try to get through it. So, a quick synopsis of the Educational Policy Fellowship Program that Ms. Goldman and I are participating in this year. So, we attended the opening retreat of the 19th cohort of the Pennsylvania Education Policy Fellowship Program on September 14th and 15th. We are among 31 individuals from across the state to participate in this year's professional development program, which is a year-long program that develops a broadened understanding of the policy process and the various aspects of education policy, enhances communication and decision-making skills, refines potential for leadership, and expands the network of professional colleagues. So the two-day event featured discussions with PA Secretary of Education Pedro Rivera and policy expert G. Terry Madonna, among others. I then had the pleasure of going to Gettysburg and Carlisle just last week. Ms. Goldman couldn't make it due to a prior engagement, but at Gettysburg, I met with other aspiring fellows from Michigan, District of Columbia, New York, Ohio, as well as Pennsylvania, and we all went to the U.S. Army War College. It was quite the experience, and we learned from colonels and majors about leadership and policy making. So so far in just two events, it's been really worthwhile. The answers to questions from some public comments in recent meetings. So there was a recommendation to improve the quality and scheduling of RAD TV programs and see about more student work to be featured on these programs. I continue to work closely with Nikki Crone, and in speaking with Mr. Bechtold, the principal, we're working to modify the coursework of the video production class to potentially include school-related projects that can be shown on RAD TV. So in this case, there will be class credit given to those projects, so they will get credit, and then you can actually broadcast those projects. I'm also in the preliminary stages of partnering with the high school administration to bring aboard a senior to gain real-world experience by assisting my office in the TV studio as part of an independent study project on the PR and communications industry, and that will be for class credit. So this way we can directly impact students, and they have a communications professional right in their backyard, so why not connect the two if that's at all possible? And the administration at the high school has been totally on board with the idea, so we hope to get that going. Comcast and their payment of the equipment here, once again followed up with Comcast, or the firm that conducted the audit of our TV studio last October. I followed up with them on October 3rd. And I heard from the lawyer, and he told me that he's about to return serve, quote unquote, on the red line, as well as submit a counteroffer on the grant amount. And they're hopeful that we'll close the gap considerably, because so apparently Comcast is saying that they believe they owe us this amount, and due to the audit, the firm believes they owe us this amount, and there must be some sort of gap there. So they must be working to, again, close that difference. And hopefully that money will help in some regard to getting some things in order here if we want to start streaming broadcasting live. A couple more. The public communications survey. The focus was on completing the administrative regulation for the communications policy. Once that's complete, which we hope to be in November or December, the focus can turn to the public communications survey and getting that schedule in place to roll that out. There was a comment by a student regarding whether teachers are I think it was a student and a member of the public, on whether teachers are evaluated for their web pages and Schoology use and the consistency of Schoology usage, and if there was one platform that could be chosen for teachers to communicate with students on classwork. And I spoke with Dr. McQuiggan regarding this, and she believes that she's fairly certain that as a result of the tech study currently going on at the high school and subsequently at the middle school and our elementary schools, We will be establishing minimum expectations for the use of technology for all staff, which will include devices, use of software, Schoology, and web pages. I say fairly certain because the committee hasn't drafted its final recommendations yet. However, there have been enough discussion around the subject during site visits, committee meetings, and debriefings that we have great confidence that that will be included in the recommendations from the group. And then lastly, teacher homepages. Why couldn't they not use the same template? That actually has already been going on after the district's redesign in February 2015. A standardized teacher homepage was developed, and trainings to teach teachers how to use it took place around that time. Most teachers now use this homepage. Ensuring all of our teachers use it, as well as keep their other pages in order, is one of the goals of our current website audit. And that's that.
Okay, thank you. Were you going to mention also, I don't know if I thought in your admin remarks, what you put into the Radnor Reader this past week?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. So I'll quickly just pull up a message that went out to the community in our recent newsletter. It may take a little while to load. Just bear with us here.
Don't you have nice hold music?
It shouldn't take.
Guess
much longer.
there's a little more conversation to be had with Comcast about loading
Well, this
time.
This is a whole different thing. This is our e-newsletter service that we've been trying to work with to get this to go faster.
So while we're waiting, I have a question about your update. You referred to broadcasting these meetings live? Is that what?
There have been discussion over the couple past years or so regarding whether we can start broadcasting live to television from this room.
Okay, and I thought that it was a major expenditure, at least thousands of dollars to do that. And so you're confirming that that is the case?
Oh, yeah, certainly, but there has been the potential of, if this audit comes through that we're doing with Comcast, that Comcast's funds could potentially pay for that upgrade.
Or would it be money that comes back to our district?
From Comcast?
Yes.
Yes, it would be the money that they would owe us as part of the agreement with public access TV stations.
Okay, but so if it's money that's going to come back to us, I would prefer that it come back to us. I don't know. I know that there are some people very interested in these broadcasting live, but I'm not sure that there's a huge push for it that would warrant thousands of dollars of expenditure.
Oh, no, the money will be ours to spend.
Okay.
If we choose to use it to upgrade this room, we would use it to upgrade this room. The audit that was done was across the board in this room and the TV studio. So I've only seen the shoot for the moon number that the firm passed along to Comcast. If that brings it down to a significant degree, we're going to have to determine what we want to use that money
Right,
for.
okay. So I just want to make sure it comes back before the committee, that we don't just allocate, if there is money to be found from Comcast. I'm not sure that it would be unanimous that it go for that.
Got it.
Okay. And you're up.
Okay, so quickly, the blurb that was in this reader, just wanted to acknowledge the community members and the parents and the staff, that completed the communication survey, and you can see this paragraph here in the center, was just to give a quick briefing to the community on what action has been taken as a result of their feedback. And several steps have already been taken. I think I mentioned them at our last meeting. So a lot of this was taken from our last Government Relations Communications Committee meeting. And so we're happy to be able to put some improvements in place and listen to our stakeholders and do some enhancements.
Yes, Michael spoke about that at the last meeting, but the fact that it's put out there in a channel, a platform like this, hopefully Amy and others can let people know that the survey, the time they took to complete the survey, many of those, much of the feedback was heard, and Michael is already hard at work implementing some of the suggestions, so the people know we appreciate their feedback. Okay, so let's move on at this point to public comment. Is there any public comment? Good evening.
Judy Sherry, Governor Circle. Just a quick review of some of my past questions, which one was what specific positive outcomes for Radnor resulted from the intimate conversations with legislators attending previous legislative breakfasts, and why aren't these conversations better held in the public arena? And were legislators asked at this breakfast meeting if future meetings could be filmed or open to the public? And getting to the quality and scheduling of programming, my TV has, for weeks now, just shown a black screen. So when we're talking about the quality and scheduling, I wondered how long will we just be getting black screens, and when will this be fixed? And related to the $17,000 cost to update equipment, I guess, the district had a representative whose name was Joan Casano, appointed to the township's cable council. She's left the district, but no one has been appointed to replace her on this council. The township is currently negotiating a new contract with Comcast. It seems logical that the district should be ready and prepared to be part of this negotiation. For example, there are PEG grants that might be available and opportunities to negotiate for live feeds from committee meetings. So whatever it is, I think that we should at least have someone designated so when this council meets, we have representation because we have one of the township's stations. And I heard that the web pages, teacher web pages in Schoolology there's going to be minimum expectations for teachers. And again, I guess, will those minimum expectations, they'll be part of the evaluations of teachers? Wondered about that. Seems odd to say minimum expectations. I always think expectations should be huge, you know. September 12th minutes of this committee state that under administrative remarks by Michael Petiti, that an update on live broadcast of meetings. Mr. McCook, here's what it says. Mr. McCook surveyed all 14 Delaware County school districts and received 9 responses. None of the 9 broadcast committee meetings None of the 9 broadcast committee meetings live or online. 1 district broadcasts their business meetings on TV live. 8 do not broadcast their business meetings live. This sounds very much like a way to persuade board members that we should look to other districts to determine the best way to communicate and serve our residents and students. Really? And based on this report, why should Radnor televise meetings live? Other districts aren't. And if this is the new approach to determine policy, it will be interesting to see it implemented in other ways. For example, how many districts have owned and rented private homes for 18 years? How many are offering full-day kindergarten? Or how many have class sizes like Radnor's? Maybe we should ask other districts what their class sizes are, and then we should duplicate them in Radnor. Are other districts offering a watershed class? Maybe we don't want to continue because other districts aren't offering watershed classes or integrated classes. Let's get a report back from other districts on these issues and base our educational decisions on their responses. What administrator or board member, I'd like to know, was responsible for deciding to spend time canvassing other districts related to broadcasting meetings live? And don't we want to serve our students and our residents the best way we can? And just a quick comment on House Bill 1285. What are the potential benefits to residents should this amendment be approved by voters? Because really, as a participant, just sitting in the audience, I've mostly heard so many negative things about this amendment. And I just always wonder, well, somebody must have thought it had some merit. What's the cost of waging a campaign against it? Because tonight there's quite a few things that the district is doing to try to prevent this amendment from passing with residents in this township. And I guess on what basis do we really think we're going to lose local control? Is there something about this amendment that causes us to think we're losing local control? And finally, has the district done a comprehensive analysis about the cost benefit of this amendment for us? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Good evening, Dr. Winters.
Good evening. I would just like to request that as you look at communications and TV studios, Radnor is in a unique position because we have a school district station, we have the township station, we also have a public access station, Radnor Studio 21, and that provides public access television not only to Radnor but also into areas of Lower Merion and Haverford. And I think it's important that we make sure we have as much public access as possible because transparency is important, not just for these meetings within the township here, but also across the region. So I think it's important as we look at that you figure out how those connections work and how those providers interact with one with another, because I think it's a complex situation. I would hate to have, rob Peter to pay Paul. How's that? Because sometimes that happens when funds are limited, and I think you really need to look at the whole picture. The other thing I would like to mention is the League of Women Voters is working hard to provide an objective review of the referendum and have both sides of those positions presented, and it's a very difficult challenge to find good information, but we will do our best to provide people with what appears to be, on one side, a tax relief, as the proponents say, on the other side, which is considered to be a tax shift on those who would oppose it. And the bottom line is nothing will happen if that amendment is adopted at this moment, but it does open the door for unknown things that we are not sure will prove either of those positions of the opponents or the proponents to be valid. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other public comment? Good evening.
Good evening. Chip Layfield, Wayne. I wanted to talk a little bit about the educational access and the fees that you mentioned, Lydia. They don't come from the township. They come from cable people that subscribe to Comcast or Verizon. And that money is assumed will be used for their benefit, which means that the shows will be televised. These meetings can be televised live. I could pull my phone out right now and broadcast this live on Periscope or on Facebook Live. It's not a big deal. It's really a minimum expectation, and I think it's your best way to communicate with the public. These meetings, we see what you do, we see how hard you work, we see how the money gets spent. I'm also frustrated with the technology. The silver light that you have is blocked now by Apple. You can't watch it on an iPad, an iPhone, or a Mac. It's completely blocked. So that I don't understand why we can't transit over to YouTube or a similar type service where people can actually watch the meetings and be able to participate at home. It's very frustrating, and I haven't heard a good reason why that's the case. Because I think a lot of people are using iPhones and iPads, and not to be able to watch the meetings it's pretty frustrating.
Thank you for those comments, Mr. Layfield. Appreciate it. Is there any other public comment? Good evening, Mrs. Spurtle.
Cindy Spurtle, Wayne. On the agenda item number 1, I have a comment on, and this is the GRCC goals that have been set up.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an attachment included. The Government Relations and Communications Committee proposed goals for 17-18. And this will be further discussed, my guess is, in tonight's meeting as to how you're going to target these one area of the comprehensive plan, that's strategic goals, and what your role might be in making sure those goals are adhered to. But the question that came up, because I went back to last week's meeting, is there's a different order for the goals. 1, 2, 3, the order is not quite reversed, but is there a reason why is number 1 more important, or they're just listed in a different order for some other reason other than the importance being number 1 down to reason number 3, goal number 3. And Mr. Petiti, going on to, now that things have been switched over to board docs for the agenda and for attachments, my understanding was that there was going to be a board doc symbol on the home page, which there isn't. You still, someone who's unfamiliar with how to find the agenda or the attachments, who wants to come to one of the meetings, has to go through there's board docs listed under school board. But if they don't know about board docs, my understanding was there was going to be. And then I went to look up the new communications policy. And when we went to the update on how to use board docs, the meeting that you held, you had said that not all of the policies had been updated in the computer. Well, the communication policy is still listed as public participation policy, under policies, because I went to look to see if the AR was done yet. This is the under board docs.
Mike.
Under
just
board
wanna
docs. I'm
clarify.
in board docs. I went to policies. I pulled up 903 because I was curious as to whether or not the AR was completed. I know it's going to be discussed this evening. And at 903 is still listed as public participation and all of the information for public participation. I, too, am curious as to whether the question was presented at your legislative breakfast as to whether or not the legislators were open to the public attending next year's breakfast. That was one thing that was going to be done as of the meeting. And I started to look into this HB 1285 myself to do a little research, thinking about whether or not this was the best way to go, to vote no against 1285. And I did find some background, and I guess in my understanding and listening to the explanation over the last couple meetings, I know this is an amendment to start a process. Things won't necessarily, whatever decisions are going to be made, there'll be further decisions made by the legislature. But my understanding is that it won't, the option of exempting 100% of the homeowner's tax burden is just that. It's an option of every local district, every local governing body. It's not a mandate. It was described, at least in several of the pieces that I looked up online when I went to look at it, that it simply gives the local governing bodies an option as to whether or not they want to go that route or and eliminate property taxes. And as Dr. Winters brought up, it was also explained that it would represent more of a tax shift than a tax relief, is the description that is given. And school districts are not required to do away with the property tax. They could, or if they do away with it, then apparently they have to find the income somewhere, so they themselves, the districts, it's the way that I understood it, would then, we don't have an earned income tax in Radnor. We do have one, but it would increase the earned income tax to bring in those additional revenues. And people within the district, say those who are retired, no longer having an income, an exemption from property tax would be a help from those individuals. That may be one way that the public is looking at it. So those are things to consider, and I'd appreciate as you go through, because I know you have done a lot of research on this, and explain it to us again as to why the district is behind and pushing a no vote for our residences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Fertile. I think it's probably worth noting, especially if there are new people new to our meetings, that the board is now taking in all of these questions, making notes of them, and we will provide answers at our next meeting to these questions. Is that correct? Within the month. Yes, so they're all duly noted. No worries on that. So with that, let's go to the approval of minutes. Committee members, anybody have any questions about the minutes? No, I just did want to note, it's two tiny typos, if that's okay. Mr. McCook on page 1 is actually Dr. McCook. And I thought maybe he would appreciate it if we changed that. And then under public comment, question number 3, the word committee needs a little extra, and another E on there. But other than that, all good?
I actually have
Yes.
I wanted to address, the minutes were brought up about in the last public comment regarding the results of the survey of the different districts in broadcasting. It was kind of taken out of context. We did record those results. We want to make sure we do research when we, check out new projects we want to maybe implement. What wasn't mentioned was that immediately after I mentioned those results, I said, but doesn't mean Radnor can't be the first. So I just wanted everyone to know that we don't need to follow other districts' lead if we want to be trailblazers in whatever regards.
Thank you for adding those comments, Mr. Petiti. So with that, let's make a motion to approve the minutes. Everybody good with that? Okay. Let's go into agenda item number 1. We discussed these proposed goals last month, but we were a little shorthanded in terms of committee members. So we wanted to make sure that the committee members had a chance to weigh in on the proposed goals and lend any comments, and we can, from there, establish them officially as goals for our work this year. So does anybody have any feedback they'd like to lend at this time to the goals? Otherwise, like it to be recorded in the minutes that the committee officially is adopting these goals. Mr. Miller, you look like you got something on the tip of your tongue there.
You generally don't advocate against something. Advocating is like, you advocate for something positive. I'm trying to think of the antonym for.
So you mean in number 2?
Advocating is just.
Yeah.
Help me out here. I'm at a loss.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You generally advocate in a positive direction. You don't advocate negatively.
It's
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, the kind of.
So it's advocate for and against.
So it's
You know
to
what I mean?
advocate.
We have an
Or
English
argue.
teacher to your right,
Oh,
so
please
do
don't
you
put
have a
that pressure on
suggestion,
me.
Teacher
It's
Representative
This
McNally?
is my
Okay.
long-held plan. All night
Okay.
I've been waiting to spring this.
Advocate
No,
for-
argue for and against.
Yeah,
I mean,
so it would have to be synonym, not necessarily argue
Or-
so maybe oppose, support, or oppose, to monitor, evaluate. No, because support wouldn't be advocate. I have to
Right.
think about it, Mike. Can't
but
put
I mean,
support.
because you generally don't advocate against something.
Advocate for.
It's
You
a
either
reasonable
advocate,
point. Okay.
something, or you.
Would you want to add oppose, advocate, or oppose?
Yeah, I mean, you could do that, right?
Okay.
Monitor, evaluate.
We just
and
would
or
have to
advocate,
change the
oppose, for,
wording
against.
a little bit to keep the the
Yeah.
parallelism.
If you say to monitor, evaluate, and advocate or oppose advocate for or oppose evolving federal and state education legislation? No? Don't
No,
like it,
because-
English teacher?
no.
Okay.
Because the four, yeah.
Yeah, it's advocate or
To-
oppose.
To monitor, evaluate, and advocate for or blank for, like, you need the parallelism.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's late. Or we could just say to monitor, evaluate. See, I like the word advocate because it has the connotation of actually some type of action. Whereas supporting.
Oh, your mic. You need your mic on.
To monitor, evaluate, oh, don't put that. To monitor, evaluate,
Yeah, but it's
and
not the right definition for the word, is it?
monitor, evaluate.
We
Oh,
have some
there you
suggestions
go.
from the audience. Do I hear
Thank you, yeah, to take a position.
to monitor, evaluate, and/or take a position, no.
Position for or against.
Oppose, it says opposition, oppose, not address, A-D-D-R-E.
To monitor, evaluate, and address evolving federal and state
To
education.
advocate against something.
It's not the. Advocate means a positive action. It's not.
Like the connotation is definitely a positive connotation, I think.
Yeah, you can't advocate
Stumped us.
negatively.
Well, you want to park this maybe for a,
Can we?
you can write in your submissions,
Good
your,
job.
it's a good question.
Got a thesaurus on the phone.
But if we're all sort of at this hour, sort of stumped for the right way to address it, maybe we park it, and we'll invite you to submit your thoughts, suggestions, and comments to Mr. Petiti with a deadline of this week, perhaps, and he can shoot out a consensus on that. How does that sound to everybody? Does that work, Mr. Batchelor and Mr. Petiti? Okay.
I'll ask my-
Any other feedback on the goals? No? Should we move forward with them and have it in the record that we officially adopt these goals for our work this year? Do I hear a yes? Do I hear maybe? I hear yes? A nod would do? Yes? Okay, got a nod, nod.
All right, go for it.
Okay. All right. Let it be noted that the committee decided that these will be our official goals for the 2017-18 school year. Moving on to agenda item number 2. We are going to turn it over to Mr. Petiti to talk about this Vote No campaign to the question that's going to be on the November 7th ballot.
Yeah, so the best way to discuss it is to pull up the actual plan. If I can find it.
I've got it.
There we go. So, you may have, if we've done some plans, communications plans in the past in this committee, so this might look like a familiar format. As just to bring everyone up to speed, the board voted on September 26th board meeting to begin an informational campaign to inform the community to vote no, and urge the community to vote no on a constitutional amendment that will be in the November 7th ballot. I'm asking to amend the homestead exclusion to 100% of a value of a property as opposed to 50%. And the board and the district strongly believes that that is a gateway to eliminating school property taxes. And the district and the board have been out front on that issue. Last February, a resolution was passed opposing that potential of the elimination of school property taxes. So this campaign is a logical next step for the district to put the word out on the importance of voting no to this amendment. So to do that, to get the word out, there's several steps we're going to be taking between now and the 6th, or I should say the 7th of November, Election Day. Several of them in the green, you'll see, have already been accomplished. There have some of them been accomplished since this was last edited, which was October 4th. Since that point, I have had a chance to talk with Larry Feinberg about the amendments to get his perspective. I had the chance to put together an email for staff and for parents that will go out shortly, and some other information was out on the Radnor Reader this past weekend. So we have some next steps coming up quickly, and we're already looking into a news release, which you can see on that list there. We were discussing the idea of lawn signs on our school property, which we're looking to get quotes from different vendors on getting those purchased and produced. And, of course, we have plenty of digital communication channels to get the word out through our email blasts. And we actually also, pretty neat, have a student who's going to write an article for the Radnorite on this issue. So I'm working with the Radnorite staff to work with that student, meeting with him on Friday, and we'll have him do a piece that highlights the issue for our students. And I'm sure we're going to want to get some quotes from our board and potentially our superintendent and whomever else that we feel we want to supply quotes to the student for. So I feel like we have a good sound plan in place, and now we're just going to have to make it happen. Any questions about what you're seeing there?
Can I mention one more thing, Michael? I know it's not necessarily a district action, but we will, as a union, RTA, be mobilizing our building action coordinators for our members in the buildings to let them know
Great.
that we're not doing that as well. I know it's not a district thing, but just to let you know.
That's fantastic.
Thank you. I did want to speak to some of the questions that came up, I think, in the public about why the district is pushing this vote no to the amendment. We recognize that the whole property tax issue, it's in and of itself, the system for property taxation is not perfect. But I think our position is that this particular approach to property tax reform is very perilous for the state of our schools. And I happened to read an article that I thought sort of took stripped it bare, because there was a state senator, who held a community forum not long ago, and he was one of the co-sponsors of Senate Bill 76. And these are his words. I co-sponsored Senate Bill 76, but we weren't able to get enough support for it in the House, Scavello said. As a result, it's hit a brick wall. So we had to go another route to come up with something which, if passed, would allow us to expand Senate Bill 76. And we as a board made a very unanimous and robust movement to oppose, like many other districts who are reliant on the current property tax system in order to operate our schools, against Senate Bill 76. So while House Bill 1285, which was passed by the General Assembly, allows there to be a constitutional amendment made, it is a pathway, as evidenced by what one of the co-sponsors of Senate Bill 76 said, to enact Senate Bill 76. And as it stands right now, while there may very well be some people who benefit from Senate Bill 70, something like Senate Bill 76, because it would eliminate property taxes, the cost to communities like ours is shared by everyone. If not in dollars, it's certainly in terms of the quality of our community. Because I think it's hard to argue that if you live in Radnor, one of the reasons you choose to live in a community like this is because of the quality of the school district. And that impacts the kind of community that forms around the school district. It impacts your home values. And if our school district is stripped of its ability to collect funding and make local funding decisions, and we essentially are being mandated, which Senate Bill 76 would do, not this amendment in and of itself, but if it paves the way for the enactment of Senate Bill 76, essentially we would have a third-party revenue source. And I think it's pretty clear to anybody who's lived in Pennsylvania and pays attention to the news once in a while, that you wouldn't want to rely at the moment on the Pennsylvania government paying your bills. Because at this point in time, they were due to come up with a revenue plan by June 30th. And we're going on a stalemate that's almost 120 days old. Now, without that cash flow, because they're not giving money to the districts right now who need it, who are more reliant on state funding, we would not have cash flow to operate our schools. I mean, we would be cash strapped. And that's just one of many reasons why we are fundamentally opposed to this kind of property tax reform. I don't think there's any school district out there who opposes this constitutional amendment or Senate Bill 76 who isn't open to something that brings relief to citizens. But this particular form of relief is extremely perilous for our district and districts like ours. I don't know if that answers anybody's comments. We have a wonderful presentation that's probably, I believe, still available online that we presented back when we passed a board resolution opposing Senate Bill 76 that I think outlines very well specifically how our district would suffer if something like Senate Bill 76 were to pass. So it's pretty logical to see why we would also be opposed to the constitutional amendment that by Mr. Co-sponsor of Senate Bill 76, he is using as another pathway to get that legislation through. Hopefully, does that answer any questions without going into too much? It's a very complex issue. There's no doubt about it. And there's plenty of information on our district website. We have a wonderful new URL that is bit.ly/vote no to amendment for anybody who wants to read any and all information that on this subject, because it is complex. But overwhelmingly, it is very perilous for our school district. And that is why we are launching this campaign to make our case to the community, why they ought to think long and hard before answering affirmatively to this very misleading question that they will find on the November 7th ballot.
Could I just say one thing? Again, I don't.
You're on.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to attend a town hall meeting recently. I don't know how many weeks it was. And there was a presentation by two of the gentlemen who had spearheaded this legislation. And I'll be honest, they were very genuine. I really, truly believe they were genuine. But the one question they couldn't answer when I asked was, the legislature has worked recently on, what's the word I'm looking for, on trying to fix the funding formula. And when I asked, ethically, when you look at us across the state and you look at districts that are inequitable, you're going to lock them in. You're going to lock their funding in that inequitable way. And when I asked the question, how are you going to handle that? That was the only question they couldn't answer. They're going to lock you in to that amount, and we'll figure that out later. We're going to give you property tax relief, but we'll figure out the inequities later. That should be a concern for all of us. The other thing is, and I have to look at the Radnor specifically because PSBA, we've been looking across the state, but don't forget, you still have to pay off the debt that is there. So you might not necessarily have complete property tax relief, and people have to remember that. The third thing, I can't remember, I'm sorry, Ms. Bertle, I think it was you who asked the question, but about, the folks who are retired and, things like that. Don't forget, the sales tax is going up. You hit a recession, you watch what happens, and then it's going to affect, all of us, and then eventually our school districts, and then eventually our property values.
Yes, we have $8 million in debt that we would need to assess for through 2035, $8 million a year. So that's still a property tax bill. And you're right. I mean, the variability of revenue for things like income and sales is very economy dependent. So you hit a recession, I mean, we still need to get our money to run our schools, and it's up in the air of how are they going to recoup that? It's got to come from somewhere. And if it doesn't come through their proposal of increasing the personal income tax from 3% to almost 5%, and sales and usage tax from 6% to 7%, and adding all these other things that we haven't been taxed for before to the mix, and that still doesn't add up to what we need, we're used to having to run the kind of programming we do in this district, then what? So I think it's safe to say that we want everybody to feel, we don't want anybody to feel too burdened, but this is not the panacea for districts like ours that it is purported to be.
And I think that the issue, it's irrefutable that it would mean we'd lose local control. And I want to just point out, too, that the budget impasse, the current budget impasse, is not something new. In 2009, when there was the economic downturn, so this actually happened in Chester Upland, which was under state receivership, so their bills were being paid by the state. Teachers worked for 6 months down there with no compensation because the state, under Governor Corbett at that time, said, we're just not going to pay our bills. And so I just would hate to lead Radnor down the path where that could potentially happen to our staff here. That to ask everyone, administrators and teachers alike, to come in for 6 months when you're not going to be reimbursed a penny, and we as a community have nothing to say about that. That happened. That happened, and it's happening again now. And we would be so foolish to put ourselves in that position that it could happen here.
Mr. Hughes, any thoughts? No? Okay. Mr. Miller?
You don't pay property tax?
Do you want to weigh in on this?
I have all kinds of thoughts.
Okay.
But, nothing.
One by one?
Nothing.
About
Yeah.
this.
Oh, about this. No, not really. Nothing for tonight. I wish Chuck was here because he have thoughts on the other side of this, but
And he was at that town hall meeting as well. It was really
he's
explained.
everywhere.
It really
So-
was explained well. It really, truly, truly was.
You're not on.
Yeah, the guy's everywhere.
I said Mr. Madden was also at the same town hall meeting that I was, and it was really, really incredibly well explained. But there were some questions from the audience that could not be answered, like what you're saying, Ms. Solomon. Yeah.
Well, in full disclosure, so our board did vote 8-1, or was it 7-1?
7-1.
7-1 to move forward vigorously with this plan to oppose this. And in full disclosure, Mr. Madden was
The one.
the oppositional vote. So there is a different thought, obviously, that he had, but the rest of us were all unanimously in favor of this.
Okay. So hopefully we've answered the questions that came up earlier. And like I said, there's copious amounts of information on this complex topic on our district website for anybody who wants more. Yes.
I'm very active tonight. If Miss Winters and the league, they do get something that is a balanced, it's hard to find a balanced presentation. Could we also add that to our materials, our communication regarding, to get the word out? Is that something we could do, in our communications plan? When Miss may not be appropriate because it's not district sponsored, but it's still, we know that the league does balanced presentations, right? Or is that a no-no?
I guess we'd have to ask the league president. I can't really speak.
I mean, I'm still working on it, it's going through the state board, so I have to,
I'm sorry, Ms. Winters, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I know that you do offer balanced presentations, and I think that's so very important. It's on your hand.
I will be happy to share it, and you can choose to do with it as you wish.
Okay. All right. Well, I just want to thank Mr. Petiti for putting together such a comprehensive plan to try to communicate our position to the community, and we look forward to seeing a response to that. Maybe they'll say when the vote is tallied that Radnor's community opposed the amendment and others didn't. But I do think we have heard from other school districts who are typically the proactive ones in this regard, asking us, what are we doing and how can we follow your lead? And I know that, I think tomorrow morning, I have a DCIU PSBA legislative breakfast where we'll be talking about this. But Patty Booker was at a DCIU meeting and said that there were other districts expressing interest in what Radnor was doing.
Yeah, we're sharing that information. We've been sharing it with other districts as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Mr. Petiti, will you walk us through the next agenda item, your communications policy AR update?
Yes, so there's a bit of a history to this policy and this AR for communications. I'll spare us that lengthy history. As we all know, that the communications policy was passed in June, I believe, of last year, and part of that understanding was that there would be an accompanying AR that would house most of the meat of the procedures, protocols, guidelines, etc. So where I am right now with writing this AR is the overarching goals were to consolidate important communications processes into one guiding document. We were going to eliminate 3 existing policies. Once this AR goes through, that would be the news media relations policy, the publications program, and the PR objectives policy. And then my hope was to complete this by November or December. The reason why it's kind of been taking longer is that it's running into the website audit, it's running into the tech study, and some of these things that are happening in conjunction with this creation of this AR will affect it or have some sort of an effect on it, at least on my mind in terms of when I'm putting together some of these sections. Speaking of the sections of the AR, there's about 12 of them currently. And they range from delegation of responsibility to types of district-operated media available for district and school communications to key communicators and district groups and corresponding communications, which may be of most interest to our community groups and district groups, because that would tell them what they can actually receive in terms of promotions based upon where they fall in the district. Whether they get a website posting and a reader posting and a news release, or they would just get something on the community bulletin board. So there's a whole other section here as well on the website, as I mentioned earlier, and we just got approval from the Office of Civil Rights to include, because we're in an agreement with them right now, to do the website audit for compliance and accessibility. So they had to review actually a section of the AR that was going to touch on our commitment to accessibility. So that approval came through September 27th. So that part of the AR, of the website accessibility component, is pretty much complete and inserted into the document. Sorry, I thought I heard like somebody talking over there. Might have a question or something.
Answering his phone.
Oh, okay. No problem. So there's also part of that section that's going to be just about website protocols. So similar to what's going on in the tech study and the conversation we just had earlier about their minimums of things and what's expected on web pages, that could be part of this AR. But again, there's a tech study happening right now. So there's some things that could be incorporated into this later, so it may need another look after the tech study is completed. So we can maybe modify some of that. That's the good news about having an AR. It can be modified relatively easily in a way, in terms of not having to go through 2 readings and then be approved. So I think we're on track, and for at least get a good substance of it in place before the end of this semester. It may need to be, once a public communications survey comes back and the tech study gets completed, it may need to be modified slightly.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I know that's been a long project in the making, those ARs, because the policy is so short and so much is in the ARs, but it'll be great when it's all done. Thank you very much. The next agenda item is discussion of the PSBA legislative platform, PSBA School Leadership Conference. Just as a reminder, there's the annual PSBA School Leadership Conference that's taking place next week from Wednesday through Friday. And at the end of the conference, there is a delegate assembly where each school district is able to select delegates or have board members volunteer to be delegates, where the PSBA creates its legislative platform for the upcoming year and makes changes to its bylaws and does other things. I know that Chuck is serving as a delegate for the delegate assembly, and he was going to review what the legislative platform for proposed 2018 legislative platform for PSBA would be. The 3 proposed items are addressing Pennsylvania's pension crisis, provide a continued fair financial investment for school districts, and enact meaningful charter school reforms. So they survey their school districts and they come up with the platforms that seem to garner the most support. And that will be adopted through a vote at the delegate assembly at the end of the conference. The other thing I wanted to mention is that on Thursday of that conference at 2 o'clock, the chairs of the House Education Committee and the Senate Education Committee will be having a forum. So for anybody who wants to spend a little time with Mr. Eichelberger and Senator Dinniman and others, it should be really interesting. I know I'm going to take a run out just to hear that. On Thursday, all board members are able to register for the conference free of charge. So I just wanted, that wasn't noted. That seems to be something that was added to the schedule, and I just wanted to make sure everyone is aware of that. Should be an interesting conversation given what's going on in education legislation. So does anybody have any questions on that agenda item before we move on to our last one? Nope. Okay. And another thing we just wanted to point out that came up in the news the other day, because it's kind of groundbreaking, is that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court opened the door to having this lawsuit that was presented by several school districts and organizations about school funding considered again. It had initially been rejected by a lower court, But the Pennsylvania Supreme Court heard the case. The plaintiffs petitioned to have the Pennsylvania Supreme Court hear the case, and they actually overruled the lower court and said that they are going to hear, this case does need to be heard. So everybody is sort of keeping their eyes trained on what happens next, because I think that they thought that item that issue had gone away. So just wanted to make sure everyone is aware of that, because it's a pretty big education topic. And with that, if anybody has any comments on that item or wants to has any new business, do I hear any new business suggestions?
Could I just, it's not new business, but I do want to clarify one other thing, and I
Sure.
think it's important. There is an issue right now with Rad TV. The channel's been down for some time. I have the tech staff is working on it. I understand that somebody from our audio-visual company had looked at it a few weeks ago, and there's an equipment failure. It's technical jargon. And that the tech needed to order the box to replace it, and then that would restart the channel. And apparently that tech has received that equipment and is coming tomorrow. That's what I've been told. My last update is that they're coming tomorrow, and hopefully that will fix the channel outage situation. So that's been on our radar for maybe a week, 10 days now since we first caught it. And then secondly, I wanted to discuss the negotiation with Comcast the township's having. That's exactly what we're in the middle of. I was brought into it in October of 2016. And this was right in the transition of Joan, so I kind of took it on actually as just something that I would kind of help out with, and at the time didn't realize it was going to get this large. But here we are, and we are in the middle of negotiating that with them.
So in other words, you're on that council that was
I'm
referred?
not on the council.
Okay.
We had no representative at the time to get involved with this audit, and I recognize the importance of us having a voice, and I insisted that they come in and look at our studio and our equipment, and I kind of, frankly made it happen that we were involved. And now we are, and we're just trying to kind of get our fair share as they wind down the process. So I wanted to just be clear that we are part of that process.
Can you look into, did Joan hold an additional position in the past with the township?
I can look into that.
Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you for being so on it and on both issues. And thank you. It's a busy department, the communications department. Did you have something, Lydia, you wanted to say?
Yeah, no, I just really appreciate you clarifying that. Thank you.
Okay.
The calculator will be fixed tomorrow.
Pardon me?
I said the calculator will be fixed tomorrow and the channel will be back up, right? Yeah. It's a technical term. Yeah. Just unplug it, plug it back in.
Yeah. Okay. All right, great. So, good work. We look like we're just up for public comment now. We got a late start, but we're going to finish with a bang. So, any public comment? It's
Without a bang, too.
well, that's true.
Whimper would be good.
About it. Yeah, that would be.
I just, again, would like to, because I overlooked it, Ms. Spurtle, though, did bring it forward, that it was really a big challenge to find information about these committee meetings on the homepage of the school district's website. And when you clicked on the meeting, which was on the calendar on the left side, you got to a website, a page that said, blah, 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 this is the meeting, these meetings are tentative, they can be changed. No information at all about board docs or where to go. So the process is labor intensive and I think really confusing to someone who might be interested and might want to attend. So you're the communications committee, so you should be really taking a look at this. I really think the chair of the committee should make sure that is an easy access.
Already did.
So
It'll happen.
So and
Chuck, what do you think?
He's not here, we can blame Chuck.
very good. And just another quick thing. we all have people have name tags, which is very helpful, again, because especially seniors can sometimes get forgetful in names, but we come to the teacher representative and the student representative, and that's their name, apparently. So I'm not sure, is that a cost-saving device not to put their names there, or would they prefer to be anonymous? Whatever. I think it would be an improvement for the public to know their names and to have them on a name tag. So, thank you.
Thank
and
you.
And I'm back to my my original comments about trying to understand the cost of this particular initiative related to this House bill. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Layfield.
Yes. Staying with the education. Several years ago, Radnor Education Channel was alive and vital. I think Mr. Morgan ran that station beautifully. We had student reporters that went out and covered events at the township level, the school district. It was amazing. But back then, the cameras were big, and they were heavy, and there was a lot of equipment to move from place to place. Now, every student has a high-definition camera in their pocket, and I don't see that level of vitality and engagement that I think, the kids are doing on social media, on YouTube, and other sites. I don't understand why that's not being brought into our educational channel, which is essentially a wasteland with a scroll. It really would be great if there could be a way to engage the kids, to communicate with the video that they do on other sites, but use our site, our educational channel. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. Looks like there's another public comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, Jack wanted to say something?
Go right ahead, Jack.
Okay.
I can wait. They can wait to hear from me.
Okay. So I'm in the video production 2 class this year, and I'm also in Rad TV. We do the morning announcements every day, even though we don't have the class every day. So it's that takes up a lot of our time focused on making videos, and so that might be why we don't have as much programming on the TV as you would like. But Mr. Krupp has set a deadline. I think it's November the 15th for pairs to have a video ready for the channel. So there should be, by then, decent amount of videos running.
Thank you. Valuable student perspective, as always. Yeah. Thank you very much. Ms. Michelson.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for taking my quick comment here. I just wanted to commend you for your presentation and speech on House Bill 1285. I thought it was clear and passionate, and I concur, and I hope that we are effective in getting the word out. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Did you sign in?
No.
My last comment is, please, instead of referring everything to House Bill 12, whatever it is, 85, would you just say referendum on November 7th ballot? That's what people are going to see, is the referendum on the ballot. That's what they need to see, that's what they need to say, and that's what they need to vote on. Thank you.
It's funny, that's why we changed our bit.ly, right?
Do we know, is it the only ballot question?
Yes. No, aren't there other ones about the judges? No? I thought I saw it on the absentee ballot, that there are questions about judges.
Yes, there are.
Okay, I know that.
I'll have to be more specific, but I think it may be
Referendum.
Okay.
Property tax referendum, say something.
Those questions is always a good plan anyway.
Yeah, just say no. We're a school district, right? So thank you for a robust, engaged discussion tonight. See you all next month.